my favourite interest, which is to actually ask on the behind-the-scenes making of a particular show. And what a show it was, because there was probably one of the longest productions that Doctor Who has ever been involved with. And what quite staggers me is the fact that I realised, God, it's 17 years ago. And is it fair to say that it would be almost impossible now to mount such a production, given the sort of way that television works these days, with its very short bursts and very lack of serious format?
I wouldn't say it couldn't be done at all. I mean, it was quite ambitious. I mean, any show that involves foreign filming, the mere fact that the filming is foreign brings problems that you don't encounter, you know, when you're shooting in the UK, but tremendous problems. And we had our fair share. I mean, all our wigs and eyebrows have never ever been found. They were shipped. No, they were shipped 17 years ago, ahead of the main party, and when we arrived there, they didn't arrive. We adjusted the schedule so that we could plough on with other material, while Pat Troughton and Lawrence Payne and Jackie Pearce lay by the pool for days waiting for the wigs to arrive. And in the end they didn't arrive. We had a wonderful makeup lady who called herself the Welsh Child, called Kathy Davis. And because she was a very, very highly qualified hairdresser, we went out and bought a load of wigs, and she adjusted the wigs and altered them and painted them and strengthened them, produced all the false eyebrows. So there's just one example of a problem that wouldn't happen in this country, because your wigs and makeup would probably be on the coach that was
So what Lawrence's own hair was, it sort of just pulled over and coiffure?
I think so, yes.
Well, we originally, we were supposed to be filming in New Orleans, weren't we? And what happened, why wasn't it New Orleans?
Well,
I never found out 17, I'm dying to be back there for 17 years.
we had an American distributor called Lionheart, and Lionheart were very, very keen on the show, because obviously they were making quite a lot of money out of it with the sales to PBS stations in America. And in fact, they would regularly say, is it possible that the BBC could make 39 episodes a year? But the BBC didn't want to invest further millions, even though there would be a remuneration from America. So that idea was hit on the head, and then Lionheart said that if you did a show filmed here in the States, we would co-produce it and fund the difference between shooting it in the UK and shooting it in America. So a script was commissioned for New Orleans, and the next thing we knew was that Lionheart said, absolutely thrilled about the New Orleans story. Unfortunately, we can't produce it because we've got a cash flow problem. So we had to very rapidly adjust it. I don't know if many of you know New Orleans, but there's a French Quarter, which became the old town of Seville.
Le Quarter Français.
The banks of the Mississippi became the olive grove. You know, so everything, you know, this is not a major rewrite as such. It was just a very quick transfer over to Seville. And if anybody's interested in why Seville, it was that our unit manager at the time knew there were some particularly cheap flights.
So I was going to say, though, suddenly you start contemplating overseas filming. It's sort of like where you start. You know, Gary, you suddenly get given a sort of a call or access to air flight ticket to go and roam anywhere within a certain radius looking for communications.
Yeah, but the whole the main location was the hacienda. So depending on where the hacienda was, that would dictate where the rest of the locations were. And so I went around Spain with my interpreter, who was a wonderful lady called Mercedes. And first of all, I used her husband Donald, who was the hello Hollywood. Yeah. Is it Hollywood, Fraser? No.
my mobile phone has the Doctor Who theme tune on it.
All right.
And the last time I did a panel, actually it went off.
Yeah, Donald, her husband, took me around looking for locations, and he was part of the diplomatic corps there. So he was trying to fix up a location manager or interpreter for me, because I believe that nobody could negotiate properly than a native of the country, because no matter how well you speak the language, it's still getting on with the people. And so his wife came around with us for a few days, and at the end when Donald couldn't do it, I said, well, I'll use Mercedes. And she'd never worked before in her life, but she's a very, very wealthy lady. And so she used to troop out of them in her leather trousers and high heels and the first day, and then she came out in her boots the second day, because she learned. But we were looking for a hacienda, and I used a 30-mile radius around Seville to find the hacienda. I found some nice ones, some had been used on movies before, and I found a lovely one, which is a white hacienda, and I thought, this is it. And then I had a couple of also rounds, because Peter Moffat, the director, liked to have a choice. And so what you do as a location manager, production manager, you show the worst location first, and you save the best one for last, because that's the one you want him to have, or her have. And so I had these three locations. On the way back into Seville, I took a road that wasn't on the map, and as I turned the corner, there was the hacienda, which is very difficult finding two-story haciendas in Seville. And I found this beautiful one with a bull ring and everything, and it was built for a Spanish opera singer. So that was the hacienda, except I had a problem because it was being sold, and the owners were selling it to one of the Hearst families, the American millionaire Hearst. And so, having negotiated with the owners who owned it, they then informed me that it was Joanna Hearst was buying it. So when I went back to, I took Peter out, the director, to see and of course he wanted the hacienda that I had. It had olive groves, it had everything, a road, it had everything on it. But I had to do two schedules. I had to do an A schedule and a B schedule. One was for A hacienda and B hacienda. And when I found those two haciendas, that's when I went looking for the river and all the other locations around it and Seville town. So you home in on the main location and then that find all the rest around.
But is it true that somewhere between you finding the river and Hamilton turning up a couple of months later, the level of...
Well, I found this wonderful river. I thought, oh, Gary, you're a genius, isn't it wonderful? You found this river, and it was really rushing down. It was rushing down, and I actually found a rock pool, because there were loads of teenagers jumping into this pool. I thought, they've got to go on the day of filming anyway. And it was fabulous, rocky path and everything. Took them out on the camera